Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us another week. Have a great show planned for you today. Later on, my guest will be Dr. Kim Miller, the superintendent of Ohio County Schools. She's been rather busy, as you may have heard. We'll talk about the recently ended work stoppage and all other things going on in Ohio County Schools. But first, I want to start with a quote of the week. This week, my quote comes from Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa, who said, "Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world." Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. I think this is a particularly appropriate quote this week, not only because education is so important, it's important to so many people, it's important to everyone. It can not only change the world, it can change someone's life. It can change that person's family's lives in the future. It can change a community, but it can change the world. And we've seen how education is so important here locally in the last few weeks. But I don't think it's just necessarily the education in the classroom that's so important. We've also had a great education in civics, in government. Our kids have been watching, everyone's been watching what's been going on here in the local area. The entire country's been watching what's been going on here in West Virginia with regard to the work stoppage that recently ended here with regard to our schools. And you know, I think that we'll be talking about that later on in the show, but I hope that everyone has realized the difference that people can make when they use their voices in the right way, how they can influence what's going on in our communities, in our state, in our nation. And the way in which this particular work stoppage, the demonstration by the teachers, the school service personnel, other public employees occurred is certainly to be applauded. I mean, they did this in a peaceful way. They used their voices. They gathered together. They organized, they sang, they rejoiced, they demonstrated, all the things they did. There was no violence about it. This was a peaceful demonstration regarding rights which they believed they were entitled to. Basic human rights such as earning a decent wage, health benefits, being able to provide for their families. So I think when you look at those things, you know, and at the end of the day, they were successful. They showed the entire country this is the way that you can bring about change. So I think when Nelson Mandela said education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world, our educators certainly recognized that and used the education that they had gained and set an example for everyone. This is the way that you can go about doing this. But the work stoppage is over now. You know, of course, it resulted ultimately in a 5% raise for teachers, school service personnel, and some other public employees. But the question remains, why did it take so long? You know, I asked on this show a couple of weeks ago, you know, when are we going to recognize that education is important, that we need to value our educators? They're with our children all day. We're entrusting not only their education to these folks, but also their livelihoods in many instances, their safety throughout the day. Why did it take so long? And if you look and if you followed the circumstances, you followed the course of events over the past few weeks, you know, it became clear that, you know, the Republican leadership in the West Virginia State Senate just didn't want this thing to be over. They wanted to dig in their heels and show, we're going to say how this ends. And ultimately, they had to cave. They had no choice. They realized that everyone was against them. The teachers and school service personnel, other state employees, the parents, the students, the teachers, the superintendents, the governor ultimately, the House of Delegates. Everyone was against the Republican leadership in the state Senate. And ultimately, they had no choice but to cave in and find a way out of this. And ultimately, the 5% deal that the governor had reached with the school employees, union presidents, he'd shook their hands and said, we have a deal, that ultimately went through. And I want to commend those that made it happen. The question also remains, what does this mean for some of those in the Senate down the road? You know, you have Senate President Mitch Carmichael, who was very vocal at the forefront of this entire issue. He's not on the ballot this November. He was elected to a 4-year term in 2016. He won't be up again until 2020. So he got a couple years until it happens, but he's still the Senate president. But will he remain the Senate president? It may depend upon what happens in the elections this November. If leadership switches back to the Democrats in the Senate, if there are enough Democratic senators elected, half of them are up for election this year, 17 to the 34. If the Democrats regain control, there will be a new Senate president elected. It won't be Mitch Carmichael. If enough Democrats are elected, there will be then a Democrat as the Senate president. What's it mean for Senate Majority Leader Ryan Fearns? Also very vocal. He was not only one of the individuals that was at the forefront of this, he was also on the conference committee. The same committee that wasn't meeting the day it was appointed, wasn't meeting the following day. There were all these delays with respect to things being happened, and the Senate Majority Leader controls a lot of those things, has a great deal of influence on a lot of when those things happen. What does it mean for him? He is up for election this November, re-election, this November. And he's got a challenger. Are people going to remember what his role was in this? It remains to be seen. Senator Blair, also, involved in this. And then you take people like Senator Ojeda, from the southern part of the state, who's running for U.S. Congress. And, he was out there battling for the teachers, the school service personnel, other state employees. He's a military veteran, and he took a hard-line stance that we're going to get this done for these folks. We're going to take care of our teachers. And, it turns out he was on the winning side of this battle, and now he's running for U.S. Congress down in the southern part of the state. What does this mean for his campaign? I think it gives it a significant boost. Delegate Sean Fluharty from here in the northern panhandle, who was, giving updates on Facebook Live updates every single night practically, in terms of what was going on. He was fighting for our teachers. He's on the ballot. You've got to give him a boost. And then former U.S. Attorney Bill Ehlenfeld, who is now running for the West Virginia State Senate here in the 1st District, going to challenge Ryan Fearns. If you look at Bill Ehlenfeld, his mother was a longtime teacher here in Ohio County Schools. His sister, a teacher in Ohio County Schools. His wife, employed by the school system. He's got into this race, I think, in large part because he wants to make a difference. He recognizes that, hey, this isn't right. This process shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't be all about politics. It should be about taking care of our young people, taking care of our educators, making sure that we put the things that should be priorities first and not politics. So I think this gives Bill Ehlenfeld a huge boost, and I think, going to be challenging Ryan Fearns in November, and I think the teachers are going to go out and vote. And they're going to say, hey, who was standing with us out here? Who was out in front of the schools, holding up signs with us? Who was out here talking to us saying, hey, what can we do about this? It was Bill Ehlenfeld. So it gives him a big boost too. So we'll keep an eye on this issue or these issues and this story throughout the remainder of the year to see how this affects these political races and whether or not the people go out and vote, whether they go out and support, whether or not they donate to the campaigns of these individuals, whether they work on their behalf. I think they will. I think this is going to be the start of a real movement here in West Virginia, and that we're going to see a lot of seats switch from Republican back to Democrat here when November comes. We need to take a break. When I come back, I'll have with me one of those who was intimately involved with this situation, Dr. Kim Miller, the superintendent of Ohio County Schools. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
Recommended by the highest authorities. Danoon Lumber.
Looks like a bad one's coming. Yeah. Right?
Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
Welcome back to the show. This is my favorite time each week when I have a guest with me, and this week my guest has been very much in the news recently, Dr. Kim Miller, the superintendent of Ohio County Schools. Thanks for being here on the show.
Thank you for having me.
What an interesting time this has been. I was just saying when we were off the air that the last time that there was any type of work stoppage or anything was 1990. I was a 9th grader at Triadelphia, what was junior high at the time, and the world has changed since then. I mean, the online presence of things, social media, this work stoppage was fully on display for everybody to see. And as the superintendent of Ohio County Schools, and not only as a superintendent, but also a former teacher, a mom, of a couple of kids here in Ohio County Schools, a lot of different people's interests that you really had to keep in mind through this whole thing.
Right, as soon as this began, the whole process began, Dr. Payne, the West Virginia State Superintendent, brought us all together, and they talked about the lessons learned from the 90s. when this was going to happen, and staying together and staying unified. I think that was the main factor in this whole process. I've heard people say since this has happened, this was the most people they've had at the Capitol with 0 arrests. It was a peaceful protest and a united state working together to get what they felt they deserved.
As the superintendent, one of the things that I think was really instrumental in this whole thing coming to an end is that the superintendents did stay together, and the superintendents stayed together with the employees of the school systems and supporting them. I think at any given time, if one of the superintendents said, we're open in school, we're having school, then you're looking at legal action. This thing's drawn out a whole lot longer than it was. I think the fact that the superintendent supported the employees really led to it coming to an end sooner than it would have.
Right. Nobody wanted to splinter the state, because the ramifications after a work stoppage or a strike are so severe, and it would take years to recover. We're in a time in education where we want to be able to move forward progressively and do progressive things in the classrooms and ask our employees to do innovative ideas and instruction. And we did not want to we were in fear of coming back to work with a splintered staff and then taking years to recover. It was a difficult time.
One of the things that has to be tough is, before you've been a superintendent for a year and a half or so here, and it's been obviously a very eventful year and a half. But before that, you're a principal, you're a teacher. So these folks, a lot of them, they're friends of yours. They're not just employees. They're friends. They're former colleagues, and you really had to take to heart their interests. But also, you've got these parents out there that some of them saying, what am I going to do about childcare? I've got to go to work. I don't have anything lined up for my kids. What did you do in order to try to communicate with people and try to balance those interests?
It was very difficult, because we knew that it was, we were very grateful for our community and very thankful for our parents. But I will say that the community came together and provided several opportunities for our students. Camps at the Y, the Children's Museum, all of the teachers there were teachers that worked to give food at the food sites, because we knew how important it was to continue to feed our children. So the community, basically statewide, really came together and still provided opportunities for our students, for those parents in need. And it was difficult as a parent. I went through the exact same thing. What am I going to do with my kids all day? And then it was the next day, and we kept on saying, just one more day, we'll be okay, and wound up being 9 days.
Did there come a point where you and or the other superintendents felt like, look, this legislative session could end without there being any deal? What are we going to do? How are we going to get school back in session? Are we going to be able to get school back in session? Did there come that point where you really had concerns?
I was fearful of that. I was very concerned that it would get to that point where it would begin to splinter our state. And then it would have been over, because like I said earlier, it would be so hard to recover from that. But when Governor Justice spoke to the superintendents, we had an opportunity to speak with Senator President Carmichael, and then we spoke with Jim Justice, and he said, staying unified is the key, and the superintendents backing their employees is the key. This short-term pain is going to have a long-term gain for our employees, and it's very important to us.
One of the things that some of the folks in the community were putting out there on social media is, look, why are we still having basketball games? We're not having academic things going on. They're academic events, and that decision was questioned by some. Why are the sporting events still going on? But I'm sure there was good reason for the decision-making process. What went into that? Well,
the academic minutes will be made up. So we have in Ohio County Schools several academic. We've accrued minutes within those days, and we will make up all of the academics that were missed. But these one-time events, we did not want them to pass by and our children not be able to participate. So it started with the regional tournaments and the sectional tournaments for basketball, and these one-time all-star, our musical events that were a one-time thing, math events. We did not want to take that away from our kids and not let them participate. So that was the initial thought behind that.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize that, you can't just delay basketball season. Then you run into baseball season, you run into track, you run into those other things. There's no way to really make that time up or make those minutes up.
Right.
You're done. And some of these kids, they've practiced since the time they were, 5, 6 years old for whatever the particular activity may be. And it's just as important to them as academics. As adults, we may say, well, academics come first. And hopefully the kids, see that, but in a lot of their eyes, that's the thing that's most important in their lives.
And we do value that. And like every time I talk to a parent or a concerned person, I'm like, we are making up that time.
What's it been like here now since, the work stoppage has ended? There's been a couple of days here now back in school. How have the school employees responded? How have the students responded? What's it been like?
They were fantastic. I hit 5 schools yesterday, and every school I went into, the staff was appreciative. They're very grateful for having a system that supported them during this. The kids were excited. It was back to business. It was right like we didn't miss a day. So it was wonderful. I mean, it was really, really great. And a lot of the schools celebrated that. I've seen balloons. We went to a school and there's notes on the door, we miss you. So, I mean, it was good. For as long as it was, big picture, this was a great thing to build the strength in our community.
We need to take a break. When we come back, I'll be speaking with Dr. Miller about some of the other things that are going on in Ohio County schools. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
We're Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration, and we're gonna save you. We've got it down to a science, an absolute state of art. We do it all, restoration, cleaning, and reconstruction. When disaster strikes, just pick up the phone. We're Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration, and we're gonna save you.
Don't forget to do your homework.
All right, Mom. Trick or treat.
Here you go. Happy Halloween.
For your home, for your life, for more than 50 years, Denoon Lumber.
Welcome back to the show. I've been speaking with my guest this week, Dr. Kim Miller, the superintendent of Ohio County Schools. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier in the show, about a little over a year and a half into your tenure now as superintendent, and it's been eventful. I mean, you know, you've, in addition to this work stoppage, you know, which hadn't happened in nearly 3 decades, and you know, you've also had a Wheeling Island Stadium come crumbling down, so to speak, and you know, other activities, flooding and things of that nature. So. Been kind of a lot to deal with in the first year and a half.
It's a lot going on, but it's been a good experience. Learning something new every day.
You know, the stadium issue with the you know, the top of it, the concrete coming away, obviously not something within your control, nothing. But you had to make some arrangements and, you know, play some sporting events at other places. But you got through it okay. But you know, people may wonder, you know, long term, you know, from the stadium, does it seem like things are okay?
Yes. Yes, the stadium is in good shape. Everything is fine. I will say that we have really great employees, and I believe that you surround yourself with good people and good things happen, and immediately we have people on it. So even in regard to the flood, even though the flood took place around the work stoppage time, there were people there ready to help.
That's always good to see. You know, one of the things people may not realize is that this election that's coming up, I talked about it earlier in the show, but it's important for another reason too, which is this bond. There's going to be a bond on the ballot that will support the school system here in Ohio County, and people may need to know what that's about and why that's important.
Sure. We are moving forward with a bond because there are several infrastructure pieces that we believe that are outdated. For example, up at Wheeling Park High School, we would like to have, we're going to take a real close look countywide actually at a security and making our buildings more secure entrances so that people don't come through the front door and have access to the whole entire building. So we're going to hit security pretty well, but as well as Wheeling Park High School, the Wheeling Park High School Science Lab is the same as it was in 1976. With the way education is changing and more innovative, we want to be able to provide an infrastructure that will support that. So we would like to gut that science department and update it and put the technology in place that would be the best for our kids. For example, Tridelphia, we're going to be having a board meeting there in the near future because we want to show, if those people that do not know, Tridelphia Middle School has an annex building where students actually have to leave one building to go to the other building to have lunch, to have breakfast, and several classes. So we would like to demolish that building and actually add on to the existing building at Tridelphia. Several projects around the entire county that we believe need attention, and that attention is not going to come through our general budget. So we believe now, 25 years ago we had a bond for 14 point something million, and now we would like to come back to our community and ask them for our support to help us make our buildings better so they can last another 25 years and, you know, that continual upgrade.
You mentioned some of those facilities. I remember the annex when I was a student at Philadelphia. We walked over there for, in fact, I had, believe it or not, shop and home ec, which I probably aren't even courses that are offered anymore. But I remember walking over there, and you talk about the science labs up at Park. I can remember being there. But the thing people may forget, Park still seems like a relatively new high school to those that have lived here their entire lives, but it's over 40 years old now.
1976, yes.
So it's been around for a while, and it is important. The world has changed. Not just in terms of needing security that we wouldn't have even thought about back when we were in high school,
right, but
also the way people learn. And just as I was talking earlier, social media and things online. Science now, it can be taught, you can look at so many things, through the use of computers that before
right,
you had to, you couldn't see or do, and now it can be done.
Right, absolutely. We know how important it is to infuse technology, and it's time to be better. We can always get better and grow. We have professional development sessions that are starting to take place so that our teachers will be able to embrace these new opportunities in the classroom. We would like to infuse technology and coding and those opportunities at younger ages, but without a bond, it would be very difficult to get some of those things in place.
People may wonder, well, why do we need that type of stuff? Why is that important? When I look at education, you and I both have doctorate degrees. We're both. I went to Wheeling Park High School. You graduated from Brooke, and there's here in the Northern Panhandle. I think that people do recognize that education is important and can allow people to get good jobs where they can stay here in the community like we've been able to do. But what would you say to those that they're going to go to the ballot and they're going to be deciding, I got to check that box, am I going to support this bond or not?
Right.
What would you say, what's your closing argument, so to speak, as to why they should do it?
Why wouldn't we want what's best for our students in our community? The better our schools are, the better our community will be, the better opportunities that our students will have when they go to college and then come back if it is out of the area. We want this to be, the best place to come. And I think that the bond will only support those initiatives. So instead of being behind the 8 ball, we'd like to get in front of the 8 ball and be leaders. And we know that we could think that can happen through this bond.
Well, I really appreciate you being on the show. I hope the rest of the school year is a little less eventful for
Me
you.
too.
And thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
We need to take a break. When we come back, I'll be talking sports. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
Methods of fighting have changed through the years, but we still fight to win. Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
Disasters happen. Pick the team that takes care of them all. Powered by offices in Wheeling, Morgantown, and Pittsburgh, Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration is ready to handle any size emergency at a moment's notice. We have the right people, knowledge, and equipment to respond 24 hours a day.
I'm Bob Huggins. When disaster strikes your home or business, tell your insurance provider you prefer the restoration company the Mountaineers call, Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration.
Welcome back to the show. It's time to talk sports. I'm going to start off with the world of college basketball, particularly here locally. First of all, congratulations to Coach Danny Sancombe and his Wheeling Jesuit University Cardinal basketball team, who won the Mountain East Conference tournament in Charleston last week. Big accomplishment there for that team. Garnered them a berth in the NCAA Division II tournament. West Liberty also a berth in the NCAA Division II tournament, despite being knocked out of the conference tournament in the semifinals by virtue of their great regular season that they had. But the big news this week has been that the Mountain East Conference tournament will be coming to Wheeling next year. The 2019 and 2020 tournaments will be played here in Wheeling at West Banco Arena, with a league option for 2021 to be played here as well. And the Mountain East Conference tournament, since its inception, has been played in Charleston at the Charleston Civic Center. And prior to that, when it was the West Virginia Conference, most of those schools made up the West Virginia Conference. It was also played in Charleston, but not any longer. The tournament coming to Wheeling, and there'll be a lot of excitement here next March, with Wheeling Jesuit and West Liberty always putting good teams on the floor, and Fairmont not too far away, typically having a good team. And that's going to be a big boost for the city of Wheeling. I think that, when you look at it, the revenue will be driven by teams coming here and staying. Ogilvy will be a big part of that. Teams and others staying up there, and the local economy being supported through shopping and restaurants, with people going to the restaurants. So I hope everybody gets behind this and really supports the Mountain East Conference and goes out and enjoys some good basketball. If you haven't seen those games, I mean, they're really played at a very high level. The players in these teams, they were the stars on their high school basketball teams. You got guys like Preston Boswell from Magnolia in New Martinsville, who's playing for Wheeling Jesuit and playing at a very high level. Dan Monteroso for West Liberty, who played over at St. Clairsville. So guys from here in the Valley are on those teams and again, playing at a very high level. So good to see the Mountain East Conference tournament coming to Wheeling. And turning to NCAA Division I basketball, WVU, I'm going to continue to say, has a great chance to do big things in the NCAA tournament. It'll be interesting to see what type of seeding they get. I said a couple weeks ago it could be anywhere from maybe a 3 to a 5, somewhere in that range. But, the Mountaineers have all the ingredients. I keep saying that. They've got, senior guard play, and Miles and Carter. They've got some, they've got good defense. They cause people to turn the ball over. Kanate inside, good defensive player, great shot blocker. The question will be is that, can the Mountaineers, get leads and hold on to them? That's been their Achilles heel all year, is giving up big leads. So will they be able to do it at crunch time? Will the foul shooting be there? Will they be able to, close out games? So I look for them to do big things. I think they're going to make a deep run in this year's NCAA tournament, regardless of how the Big 12 tournament goes for the Mountaineers. But I think that the NCAA tournament is there for them to do well. A lot of teams around the country aren't used to seeing the style of basketball the Mountaineers play with that trapping defense. The Big 12, some of the teams have kind of gotten used to it, seeing them a couple times a year over the number of years. But I think they can really cause some problems for people in the NCAA tournament. Pittsburgh's a host city, don't forget. They'll have the Thursday, Saturday games next week on March the 15th and 17th. So, if you have the means to go up there and try to find a ticket to the games there, really exciting to see those NCAA tournament games. I've been a couple times. It's a lot of fun. Spring training is underway. Speaking of Pittsburgh, Pirates are underway. Opening day only a few weeks away. It's been announced that Ivan Nova will be the starting day pitcher, and Jamison Tynan will get the home opener on Monday, April 2nd, less than a month away now, when the Pirates will open up at home. They'll first be on the road the week before that. And also out of Pittsburgh sports news, the Steelers have used the franchise tag on Le'Veon Bell for a second year in a row. A lot will come out of this. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll talk about it in the weeks to come. But Le'Veon Bell not happy about having the franchise tag placed on him the second year in a row. That means he doesn't have a long-term contract and he has to play on a one-year deal. He says he will not report to training camp. He won't show up until the first game. If that's the case, doesn't want to risk injury or doing anything extra. Thanks for being with us here again this week. Appreciate you joining in. We'll see you again next week on The Jamie Bordas Show.